Does anyone want to talk? So I have mine on finale, and I don't know why, for some reason, the system doesn't like to play finale through the speakers, but I can go ahead and play it anyways, and you might be able to hear a little bit out of this small laptop. I guess I just want you to kind of hear at least the melody and what you score, which you took all the time to write. So. Let's see. Yeah. That's all we're going to get. Hopefully when I play something from YouTube later in the class, that'll work better and come out through the speakers. It's supposed to. For something, the YouTube uses one kind of sound device to produce the sound, and now it uses something completely different, and they don't like to agree sometimes. Alright, so let's get rid of that. Alright, so today, according to your assignment sheet, I do want to talk about the horn, that is the French horn, and I don't need to get really much further than that today. I don't know, do you mind, let's take a few minutes to look at the assignment sheet. I made a few slight adjustments, they're not anything major, but I do want to just let you know so that you're on the same page as I am. So if you have your assignment sheet, you want to look at that. Notice that what is due this Wednesday, March 17th, it says worksheet 13, horn and trumpet transposition. I've changed worksheet 13 to be just about the horn, so it's not a big deal. But worksheet 13 will still be due, but it's just on the horn, it's not on trumpet. Then the next three assignments after that, I have changed the worksheet number. So for instance, the worksheet that's due on March 22nd, that's going to end up being worksheet 14. And that's going to be on trumpet. See, what I did is I used to have horn and trumpet on the same assignment, so now I separated them and split them apart. So March 22nd, it'll be worksheet 14. What's due on the 24th will be worksheet 15. And then the 29th will be worksheet 16 will be due there, rather than 15. Just so that you're not confused when I give you these things as we go through this week, and the numbers don't match up. I just wanted to let you know that I've separated what used to be horn and trumpet in worksheet 13. I've separated those out into two separate worksheets. So, and that's really those are the only changes I wanted to let you know about. If you have any questions or if it didn't make sense or if you're confused about something, just let me know. I'll try to square you away, get you on the same page. All right, so today we need to talk about the horn. And the horn is, let's see, chapter 7 in your book. I do ask you to do some reading from chapter 7 between now and next class. I don't ask you to read the entire chapter, because I don't need you to know anything about the special effects of the horn. I don't think we need to get that detailed. But a couple things you need to know about the horn. First of all, the term French horn is seldom used by musicians. Horn is sufficient to designate the instrument. I mean, we know it as the French horn, but horn is simply enough to just designate the instrument. You don't have to use the term French. If you want to designate the English horn, then you, of course, would have to say English horn. But if you say horn by itself, that denotes, or that just means by default, a French horn. Okay? In fact, the author says it's difficult to understand why the adjective French was ever included in the name. So, there you have it. The horn is very often used as if it were a member of the woodwind family, even though it's not. It's a member of the brass family, you know. But because the tone of the horn blends almost equally well with woodwinds as it does with other brass instruments, it is very often used as if it were a member of the woodwind family, even though it isn't. So for instance, if you have like woodwind quintets, very often they'll include a French horn in there, even though it's not a woodwind instrument per se. I mean, it's clearly a brass instrument, but its tone blends very well with other woodwind instruments, so it's often used with those in an ensemble. I don't really want to go through too much detail about the various transpositions of the various horns. Your book will actually, it has a table on page 124, and it lists a whole bunch of horns pitched in different keys and how they would transpose. Let me see if I can get the document camera to work here. I don't think you need to know anything about that. Just know that the table, transposition table, is there. And of course, we want to know that the main horn transposition is the horn pitched in F. So the horn in F actually is found the perfect fifth lower than written. So let me back up and see if I can. Yeah, here we go. So the bottom of page 124 in your book, there's something called Table 7.1. And it's got horns pitched in a variety of keys. And it just tells you respectively how they all transpose. Notice that every single horn in this table sounds lower than its written pitch. If you ever come across on an assignment or somewhere in this class just a stray horn, like a horn that's pitched in E flat or in D or in G or something like that. I'm not asking you to memorize this, but just know that you can find out how these differently pitched horns transpose. And they all sound lower than their written pitch. What's another resource or page that I gave you earlier in the semester you could use that has this information? Okay, yeah, the appendix, yeah, that's very good. It's something I actually handed out to you. Yeah, the green sheet will actually give you this information as well. If you can't remember where this table is in the book. But I'm not concerned about most of these. The main one I'm concerned about is the standard modern horn in F. And we know that the French horn or the horn in F sounds a perfect fifth lower than written. The one reason I draw your attention to this table on the bottom of page 124 is that on your assignment for the horns, I do have you transposing some horns in F, but there's also some horns in C that I want you to transpose as well. According to this table, how do horns pitched in C, how do they sound compared to the written pitch? An octave lower than the written pitch, that's right. Okay, so you'll need to know that and use that further. There's not a whole lot of it, but that comes up on the next assignment. Okay? But mainly, the horn in F, as you can see right in the middle of the table there, it sounds a perfect fifth lower than written. Okay? Valveless horns, what were known as natural horns way back centuries ago in the day. Again, I don't feel the need to cover too much of that information. I don't think I'm going to test you or quiz you on that. Maybe you know this already from taking a class in brass. Which class in brass involves the horn? Is it one or two? One. That's not offered this semester. That's offered in the fall semester. Okay. Well, those of you that have it, the natural horns, do you know what restricted set of notes were natural horns able to play? Yeah, the notes of the harmonic series, that's right. So natural horns, which didn't have any valves centuries ago, they were only able to play notes that were part of the harmonic series. Okay? They could only play the notes of one harmonic series at a time, actually. And let me give you, there's actually a picture of the harmonic series in your book. It's actually like right above this table if you like care to look at it. Mine is a little bit goofy, so I like to use this one. I have from another book. And this isn't the entire harmonic series, it just shows the first, it shows the fundamental and it shows the first 15 overtones. Okay. But just so you know, before the horns had their valves, they could only play these intervals of notes of a particular harmonic series. So if, for instance, if a natural horn is pitched in C, as this is showing you the overtone series on C, they could only play an octave above C and then a fifth above that, and then there's successive pitches beyond that. And the further you got up in the harmonic series, the harder it was to play those pitches, and the harder, more difficult it is to play those pitches in tune. Okay. So if a composer needed a natural horn, we're talking in the classical period, like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, things like that. If they needed horns to play pitches that were not found in their particular overtone series, well then the horn players had to, they had a piece of tubing called a crook. And they had to insert the crook into the horn to alter the pitch of the fundamental, the very first pitch. And when you alter the fundamental of the first pitch, then all the overtones, they change as well. So you could access, you could get different pitches or different notes that way, okay? But a crook, a small piece of tubing had to be inserted into the natural horn to change the pitch of the fundamental, that is to change the length of the tubing of the horn itself. That would change the fundamental, and it would allow the player to play the notes of a different harmonic series. And the author goes into a lot of detail about that. You don't need to, be an expert on that by any means. But the author does mention, can you imagine that back in the day we're told that the horn player had to keep an assortment of crooks hanging on his or her arm in order to be prepared for necessary pitching? You had to just pull them out and put that in your horn and get a different set of, a different fundamental, a different set of overtones, and then if something else happened in the piece, you had to pull that crook out and put another one in and everything. So, just so you, I don't want you to think, this term, it doesn't mean, we're not stealing or burglarizing anything. But the term crook is important when you talk about French horns, or natural horns, I should say, before they had valves. They were essential part. And so if I ask on a test, for instance, what brass instrument or what instrument would a crook be used for, you wouldn't say, the contrabassoon or something like that. You would say the crook is used for the French horn. At least you know that. Did you guys talk about crooks at all when you were in classes as well? I don't know, does the school, did your instructor, did we even own a natural horn? Did they show you how that works? So I even know what to do, yeah. I'm just wondering. I suppose if you want more information on that, you can always talk to, who plays the French horn? Dr. Durant? Let's talk to this one. Okay, enough about crooks. The invention of valves occurred in 1813, but the modern valve horn did really not come into general use until about the middle of the 1800s. So again, this is after, Beethoven died in 1827, and so it's really not until 1850 or somewhere around there that the French horns with valves started, coming into general use. Okay. All right. Now, let's focus on the horn in F. Of the many horns that were once employed, the horn in F has proved to be the most satisfactory. And it has survived with valves added as the one horn that is in general use today. So, one thing I do want you to know, again, not necessarily, you don't have to have it memorized precisely. I remember the first time I looked at the range for French horn, I was really impressed. I mean, they have a lot of range. I never knew, when I was your age, I didn't know that French horns could actually sound and go as low as they do. But take a look at this rangefinder. This is on page, well, whatever page it is, 126 in your book. And notice that these are notated pitches for the French horn, that the French horn actually sounds a perfect fifth lower than these. Okay? So we're talking, the open note heads, those are the extreme ranges. The filled-in note heads, those are more practical ranges. And so if we have, for instance, the low practical range on the French horn is a notated A, right here. So that means a fifth lower, practically the French horn can go this low, which is low as a regular tenor trombone goes. Okay. And if you go to the extreme range, here's the lowest notated pitch, and if that's true, then the French horn can technically get down this far, which is really low. Okay. On the upper end of the spectrum, we have this is the highest notated pitch. So we're talking about French horns don't really play much higher than C5. C5, and that would be kind of high for French horns to play. Okay, horn parts should always be written in the. Now I know that this rangefinder shows the bass clef, but I do not want you ever writing pitches for the horn in bass clef. Okay? Horn parts should always be written in the treble clef whenever possible, even if several ledger lines below the staff are involved. Horn players do not typically read from the bass clef. So, even if you have to, do something like this, and we know that that note is an F, that's okay to write that using the treble clef for the horns, and they're going to sound a fifth lower than that. But that's okay. Sometimes they read, several ledger lines below the treble staff. Okay. So let's keep all the written notation for horns and F. Let's keep it all notated in the treble staff, and not use any other clefs for the French horn. And the author will go into a whole bunch of detail about how some notes for the horn used to be notated in the bass clef, and when they were notated in the bass clef, you had to transpose it differently. And I don't even want to mess with all that because that's just really confusing. It's outdated, it's antiquated, and it's not really in use in general practice anymore. So. But you can read about that if you want. Okay, the horn by nature is not a particularly agile instrument. So the melodic lines that you write for the horn should be relatively smooth, and they should avoid awkward leaps. And as another instrument, this is our first brass instrument, just like woodwinds, it's always helpful and nice to write in plenty of rests, not only for woodwind players, but also for brass players. There should be sufficient rests to give them enough time to breathe and enough air. The author tells us that the horn is one of the most difficult of all orchestral instruments to play. You guys get for classes of brass you can actually play. Try to get some notes coming out of the French horn. That mouthpiece is not very big, is it? In the French horn. Well, I guess the trumpet isn't either, but still, the French horn is like, it looks like it's really big. Okay. So, one of the most difficult of all instruments, orchestral instruments to play. Horns are generally used in three main ways in the orchestra, and these I'll point out to you. These are in the book. I want to highlight these. Found on page 130 and 131. Anyways, the middle of page 130 roughly, we have one way that horns are used in the orchestra that the author brings out is the fact that they're used on harmony parts. And that probably is not anything new information to you. In fact, you probably hear horns playing harmony parts and chords a lot in the orchestra. And there's a reason why you hear a horn timbre on the chords. In its middle register, it says the horn tone is ideal for background because it can be made unobtrusive without using multiple notes. I think the author will mention how, especially in the Romantic era, composers gave the horns tons of sustained chords, long tones for chords, harmony, things like that. Not that they weren't used for melodic ones or solo ones either, they were, but very much they were used on harmony parts, and so romantic music sounds kind of plush or lush in that sense because you always have all these horns playing these long sustained chord tones. Okay, also on the same page, down on the bottom. Number 2, the horn used in the orchestra is also used in a solo capacity. In fact, I believe, I didn't look before class, but I believe Mozart wrote 4 horn concertos. And that's again where you have a solo, the concerto, the solo instrument. In this case, it was the horn against the orchestra, pitted against the orchestra. So there's those, and you can find in the repertoire you can find lots of solo music for horn. It does do well as a solo instrument. I think you just have to score kind of lighter. You can score a little quieter if you have any other orchestral instruments or any other instruments playing with it. And then finally, over on the next page, the last way that the horn is used mainly, an important way it's used in orchestra. It says, number 3, 2 or more horns are used in unison on a melodic line. And again, if you have, the more horns you have playing a particular line, the more power, the more strength you're going to get. You can probably think of a piece or something in a symphony orchestra where you've heard the horns blasting. Maybe 4 of them or even more horns are playing all the same thing. That's very nice to hear sometimes. Very nice to hear the strength. In fact, we have some more. We have a horn player. Yeah, you do have a horn player. Okay. Any other horn players besides JC? Minnesota? What are your impressions? How long have you been playing the horn, Jason? 2 years? Would you agree? Is it a pretty difficult orchestral instrument to play? Yeah. Oh, really? Does it take now the pages are going to be good. Does it take more air?
I think it takes less air, there's less resistance to it.
Okay.
It's the partials are so much closer, it's a lot harder to, especially since I'm used to like the trumpet pitches. It's hard to be able to know exactly what the partials are.
Okay. Do you like playing the French horn? I mean,
Partly because it's a challenge.
yeah. It certainly has, I mean, I love the tone. I love the sound of the French horn. You know, it's not as strong and bold as the trumpet. It's got a mellow sound, but yet it's not, it's not mellow and round like the tuba or the trombone either. It's got a distinctive sound. And when you play it, you're supposed to put your hand in the bell. Is that correct? Or I don't know which way you hold it.
But we have the bell covers now, so that's hard to hear.
So you can't. That's a good point. Okay, so anyways, if you wanted to know the 3 ways that horns are used most importantly in the orchestra, here it is on harmony parts, in a solo capacity, and then finally 2 or more horns in unison on a melodic line. I do want to see if I can play some examples for you from YouTube. So give me a minute here, and I'll see if I can get the sound to come through the wireless display. Okay, that's good sound. This is, we won't listen to the whole thing. Just the beginning has some solo horn. You can see it coming the last measure of the screen here. Anyways, a passage from this opera overture is on your homework assignment. So you're going to be doing some transposing from this. But this is an overture to Weber's opera Der Freischütz. And it's, I probably played it, and if you have me for other classes, I may have played segments of this overture before, but it really brings out the horn. We have, yeah, I think there's going to be 2 horns in F. Can you see that over there for me? That's the, it doesn't mean that horn players tell great jokes or bad jokes. Corno is the singular for core, for horn, corny is the plural. There's 2 horns pitched in F, and then there's 2 horns pitched in C. Let me go back a little. Is it coming out of the speakers? Yeah, got it tuned up really well. Maybe because it's just so slow. Okay. See if it gets nice. Those are the horns in C. Now the 2 horns in F come to get different partials. Well, maybe not the best recording, but at least it's a recording that has this flow. Another example that I want to have you listen to is a little bit different. This one comes from later. I don't know if any of you have taken music history yet, if you studied the composer Wagner. Wagner, you may know, he wrote a set of 4 huge operas called the Ring Cycle. And the very first opera to the Ring Cycle is known as Das Rheingold. And the overture, the beginning, the prelude, I guess I should say, to the first of those 4 operas, Das Rheingold, is here I have as an example on YouTube. And besides, well, let's see if you can increase the size of this so we can see just some of the instruments he uses here. Let's start here. You can tell me, if you can see from where you are, what 2 instruments are sharing the top staff here? Right. First and second bassoon, right? Fagot. We talked about that. And then the next staff is third bassoon, right? How about the bottom 2 staffs? Okay, contrabass, right? String bass. How many are playing for that third from the top staff? 4. How many are playing the bottom staff? 4. Okay. And then, let's see here. Well, let me just play this. after a long time, well, not long, after several measures, there's going to be some horns that come. Okay, there you see. They're notated in the base clef. So I'll start this again, but can anyone see from where you are in the upper left-hand corner, how many horns does one use in this? 8? And you can see that the one that's starting right there on the leftmost measure, that's the 8th horn. Then there's the 7th horn and the 6th horn. And as we go through, he just keeps adding some more horns, and they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And what Wagner is trying to do is he's trying to depict, through the music here, he's trying to depict the movement of the water on the Rhine River. And I think he does it actually very well, because not only do we start out with this really low fundamental, the bassoons and then the string basses, but then he makes it sound like the water is gently moving or slightly going back and forth, rippling with the horns. And then after the horns have a chance, then he brings in cellos and some of the other instruments, and the water starts moving faster and more vigorously, and that kind of thing. And he takes like, I don't know how many hundreds of measures, but it's just amazing. You should see his score. I mean, it's just page after page after page after page of this stuff. But he really wants to set the scene. This is the beginning to the first of 4 huge operas in the ring cycle. And you can hear the horns come in. Remember how low we said the horns can go? Look at all the horns. That's really as deep and as specific as I really want to get about the French horn. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's just a cursory touch on the instrument. Just as long as you know that we're going to be dealing with this one mainly, how it transposes. You know the term crook. It's written always in the tone staff, things like this. So, in order for me to get you your next assignment, and it's just one side. This is going to be worksheet 13, and this is due in Wednesday, next class. So. Oh, yeah. Yep, thank you.